Today we're taking a quick look at modifiers in UModelerX, a non-destructive system that lets you reshape your model while always keeping the original mesh intact. Modifiers stack in order, can be toggled on and off, renamed for clarity, and rearranged to control how each effect is applied. You can add new modifiers, disable them, or delete them entirely, and when you're ready, you can even combine them to bake the results into the source mesh. Now, just keep in mind that combining is permanent, so it's best used when you're confident in the changes. So in this video, I'm going to show you how the modifier stack works, how to manage it efficiently, and how these tools can speed up your modeling workflow. So let's jump in and take a look. All right, so taking a look at our scene here, I have a game object. And the first thing you want to do to get to the modifiers is to select your game object on the right side here, where it says UModelerX, and you'll see the source mesh. Then you'll see three different icons. You have the collapse modifier, the add modifier, and then you have the remove modifier icons. And of course, if you actually want to add a modifier, you click on this plus symbol, and you're going to have the list here. You have the bin, decimate, FFDs, the mirror, push, shell, subdivide, linear array, and the radial array. So for this object, let's take a look at the decimate. So I'm going to click on decimate. And in here, once you have a modifier selected, below that, you're going to see some different modifier properties. Now, these properties, of course, are going to change based on the modifier that you have. So in this case, we can do some different things. We can change the max count, the aggressiveness, the ratio. Now, in this case, as soon as I change this to decimate, as you can see, it's changing the object itself. Now, of course, if I select source mesh, this is basically like a layer stack. So you could add additional modifiers if you need to, but we're just going to focus on just adding one modifier for now. Now, and of course, you can check this off if you want to turn a modifier completely off. And you can also double click on this to change the name here. All right, so what we're going to do is go ahead and just play with this. But basically, the modifier for decimate is really just to decimate your object. And it just makes it easy to do that. So if you want to change it all the way to a different shape, keeping all your textures and everything kind of in place, but you want to reduce the poly count of this, this may actually be a good option for you. The next modifier we're going to take a look at is the bin modifier. I have my object here. Let's go ahead and select it and go ahead and apply the bin modifier by clicking this plus symbol. All right. Well, just like the name suggests, what it will do is bend your mesh depending on the angle or the direction or the bin axis. You can also play with the limit. You can also play with the pivot. Now, you could adjust the pivot by using these, but you can also move the pivot point around within the scene itself. Now, depending on the pivot point will determine where your bin is based on. So for instance, if I put the pivot point maybe about here, and I go ahead and change the angle of that, you'll notice that it's bending based on that pivot point. So if we kind of in the center, then this should fan out all the way around that center point, just like so. Great. So now what we can do is change the angle again to say the bin axis to X, and you'll see that now the pivot point is in a different position, but the bend is based on there. So if we want the bend to go around this pivot point, and if we move this around like so, it's going to bend around there. Great. Now, of course, depending on the edge loops you have, that will determine how much bend you're going to get. Great. All right, and we're going to change it to the Z as well. And as you can see, now we're bending on the Z. And if I do this and change that pivot point, we actually get it to go around that point there. So it just depends on if you need a certain shape. This will help you get to that shape very quickly and easily. Next, let's look at our next modifier is the subdivide modifier. Here we have a cube that's already been cut up, but we want to add even more divisions to this. So you can quickly go ahead and click the plus symbol, go down to subdivide, and once you go to subdivide, you'll see subdivision levels. 0 is going to be your standard where you started, and then if you click 1, you'll see the magic happen where it actually adds additional subdivisions. And as we click even more, we can do even more. Now, if we go to 3, we're pushing it, but you can really go really high with this, and you get some nice edges on here as well. Subdividing is great, especially when you need to add additional detail to a mesh. All right, so our next modifier we're going to take a look at is going to be the FFD. So with my object selected, I'll go ahead and hit this plus key. And what we have is 3 different options. We have 2, 3, and 4s. What I'll do is go ahead and add the 3. Now, what FFD stands for is freeform deformation. And to keep it pretty simple, it's basically a grid of vertices over your mesh. And it allows you to actually deform the mesh underneath without having to actually edit the vertices individually in your mesh. To do this, you can just deform the mesh based on these select few. This is really great for when you need to make large shapes and you want something kind of unique, as you can see I'm doing here. And it just makes it really easy. I would say play with this and to see what type of shapes you can get with it, because it's really great for that. The next modifier we're going to take a look at is our shell modifier. So to use a shell modifier, first you need an object that you need to apply it to. And here we have a sphere with a cutout here. Now what we really want to do is have the inside also be filled in. So what we'll do is go ahead and click our modifiers list, go to shell, and I'll show you. Just like that, we have a mesh here. But what we want is some more thickness. So what I'm going to do is head over to the inner size and do a 0.05 or even a 0.9. And as you can see, we're getting some thickness here. And if I go out of here and I actually collapse my stack here, I'll go ahead and collapse my stack. And as you can see here, now we have a mesh with faces on the inside of here. And this can be very useful for building all types of things. The next modifier we're going to take a look at is the push modifier. It's a very simple one, but let's go ahead and add it. We're going to click on push, and all it's going to do is push our faces in the opposite direction. So what I'm going to do is change this to a 0.05. And you can change it just a little bit or a little bit more. As you can see, all it's really doing is changing, almost like it's scaling the object, but it's based on the faces or the normal faces of this. So you may actually find some use case for this. But as you can see, with the source mesh selected, this is what our object was, and this is what it did. It pushed it out. Now, what's really cool is, say for instance, we did do this, you can now do some additional things. You can add the shell modifier if you want. So we can do the shell, and then with the shell, we can now add a little bit more to this. And now you have a shell that has double modifiers, and you can turn one off or you can turn the other one off. It just depends. Another modifier to take a look at is the mirror modifier. This is yet another useful modifier. So for instance, we have this house here, and if we want duplicate houses, in a lot of cases, you could just copy and paste. But if you wanted to mirror, what you would do is go click on the object, then click on your modifier list and click mirror. And here you'll see a panel that shows up in the center, or it could actually be down, or it can be this way. It just depends on your mirror axis. But what you can do is actually select this tangent here, and you can actually move it. And as you can see, it's mirroring this here. So we could theoretically double this, almost like we're making like a condo or some type of housing solution here, or we could do it in a different way. We could do it on the y-axis where it's upside down in maybe some type of other situation. But whatever you decide you want to do, the mirror tool will allow you to do it pretty easily, and it makes for some unique opportunities. So the next modifier we're going to take a look at is our array modifier. Specifically, we're going to take a look at the linear array. So I'll go ahead and add that to this platform here. Now this platform is just something, say for instance, you have a game and you want to create multiple platforms. So I created something like that. So what we do is add the linear array here. And what you're going to get is a length type, a pattern, and a batch count, also with an offset. But you can also change that by just moving it here. So if you can see, I have this like this. And what it's doing is duplicating your object or arraying that object over a distance. So as you can see, my batch count is 2, but if I had put, say, 5, then we can move this out. Now this is great. So if you wanted to have like a very specific jump pattern here, but it's even nicer because you can actually move it in any direction you need. And this is very, very useful. And what's really cool is that we can just do as many or as least as we need. So this is really nice, and we can just continue to do that, and we can do it over a distance. You can do it over a height like that. It just depends. So something to play with, I think. And what's great is if we go to the source mesh and we actually edit the source mesh, those changes will be added to the actual object in that array. And for our last modifier here, we have the radio modifier. So I'll go ahead and add that one. And with the radio modifier, it's very similar to the linear, but it's going to be in a circular direction. So what we can do here is go ahead and move this out just like so. And what it's doing is creating a circular shape, and your object is going to go around that shape. Now my source mesh point is here. That's where the pivot is. I'm going to change the pivot point to the center of the object. But what I actually want to do is let me go ahead and remove that radio, apply the pivot to the object itself, just like that. And then what I'll do is go ahead and add the plus back to that. And so now what we will have is that radio to be based on the center point of those objects. So what we'll do now is add more to our batch count. And as you can see, we're adding a nice set of platforms going around this circle. This is very useful depending on the object. I'm using a platform, but you can use all types of meshes for this. And that's the full tour of the modifier system in UModelerX. With stacking, renaming, toggling, rearranging, and combining, you got a flexible, non-destructive way to shape your models exactly how you want. Once you get comfortable with these tools, you'll find yourself iterating faster, experimenting more, and keeping your workflow clean from start to finish.